All right, thank you everybody for joining us for the TAC meeting. Thank you for joining us for the TAC meeting. This is the start of the Sonoma County Transportation Authority and RCPA Technical Advisory Committee. So today we don't have minutes. We will have those at the next meeting for your review and our action. And so our second item, I'd like us to go around and introduce ourselves to each other. Starting with Hunter.
My name is Hunter McLaughlin with SPI.
Pause real quick. Just a gentle reminder that for the folks on the Zoom meeting, it's much easier to hear if you speak directly into the microphone. So if you want to just pop that up, it's. Thank you.
That's my turn. Ashley Cotter, City of Sonoma.
Mark Rincon, City of Sebastopol.
Greg Scott, City of Cotati. Bjorn Griepenberg, City of Petaluma.
Brendan Barrett, Town of Windsor.
Clay Thistle, City of Hillsburg.
Tarina Wilson, City of Santa Rosa.
Derek Montani, City of Cloverdale.
Dave Rupert, SCTA, RCPA.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Shauna Gause, SCTA, RCPA.
I'm Elizabeth from Sonoma County Regional Parks, going to the back.
Adam Garcia, SCTA, RCPA.
These on the upside down for those on Zoom.
Oh, is it me next? I'm Stephen Hunter from Sonoma County SPI.
I'm Lori and Rocchioli from Sonoma County SPI. I'm Giovanna Villaggio, Zara Montano, and I'm also.
Chris Barney, SCTA.
Hey, that's right, SCTA, RCPA.
Andrew Nichols, SCTA, RCPA. And then I will read the names that I see on Zoom just to make it easier for all of us in here. So with SCTA, RCPA staff, we have Steph Britt and Margot Acanias. We have Gillian Adams from MTC. And then I see a Veronica Levchenko from SPI.
Thank you. And so that moves us on to item 2, public comment. I didn't hear that there were public joining us, but is there any public comment?
I did not receive any pre-submitted public comments, and I do not see any members of the public on Zoom either.
All right. Well, thank you. So item 3, the presentation of the MTC, Transit-Oriented Communities.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Sorry, Chris, did you want to say anything? I'm Gillian Adams. I'm a principal planner with ABAG and MTC, and I am here today to talk about implementation of MTC's Transit-Oriented Communities policy, as well as how local jurisdiction compliance with the TOC policy may affect funding eligibility for MTC's One Bay Area Grant Program, or OBAG, as you might know it. I'm going to share my screen really quickly.
And Chris, did you want to do an introduction?
I can follow up with some comments after Gillian's presentation, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great.
So my agenda for the presentation today is to provide an overview of the TOC policy requirements, to give you an update on where we are in implementing the policy, and introduce you to our initial thoughts on how the TOC policy is going to be integrated into the OBAG 4 program. So the TOC policy was adopted by MTC over 2 years ago now, in September of 2022. Its purpose is to support the region's transit investments by centering housing, jobs, services, and shopping around public transit, specifically the half-mile area around stops that are served by rail, light rail, bus rapid transit, and ferries. The TOC policy focuses on the core elements that align with implementation of Plan Bay Area 2050, which is mainly land use density, affordable housing, parking management, and complete streets and multimodal access. Some of the TOC policy's requirements vary based on the level of transit service, and the 4 different transit tiers are represented by the different colors on the map shown on the slide. There are currently 62 jurisdictions throughout the region that are subject to the TOC policy, and you can access the map as well as a list of the TOC areas by jurisdiction from MTC's TOC policy webpage. And a key aspect of the of implementation of the policy is that MTC is committed to considering TOC compliance and allocating regional discretionary funding, such as funds for Regional Measure 3 and OBAG 4, with jurisdictions expected to demonstrate compliance by early 2026. So this slide highlights some of the key requirements in each of the TOC policy's 4 policy components. The first component is higher intensity development near transit. The policy includes minimum density standards specifically for development of new residential or commercial office uses. The density requirements vary depending on the level of transit service and are defined as an average of the minimum density assigned to parcels in the TOC area. In calculating the average, the standards only apply to those parcels where new residential or office uses are allowed, and jurisdictions can exclude the parcels that have any existing dwelling units on them as a way to try to stop displacement pressure on existing households. The second component of the policy is affordable housing and commercial stabilization. A jurisdiction has to adopt 2 policies for each of the 3 Ps of affordable housing, excuse me, production, preservation, and tenant protections, as well as 1 commercial stabilization policy. The TOC policy does provide a menu of options so that jurisdictions can choose the policies that best meet their local needs. The third component of the policy is parking management. The policy sets standards for parking maximums that vary by the level of transit service, and the parking standards apply to new residential and commercial uses. There are also additional requirements for bicycle parking, shared parking, unbundled parking, and transportation demand management, curb management. And lastly, the fourth component is transit station access and circulation. And to comply with these requirements, a jurisdiction has to adopt policies or guidelines that comply with MTC's Complete Streets policy, prioritize implementation of active transportation projects on the region's active transportation network or any relevant community-based transportation plans for the area, complete an access gap analysis and an accompanying capital or service improvement program, and identify opportunities for mobility hub planning and implementation. So in terms of what we've been doing to date, working on implementing the policy, we've had over 200 meetings with stakeholders, including 2 rounds of one-on-one meetings with staff from the 62 TOC jurisdictions. Last fall, we released the final administrative guidance document, which contains more detail about the policy requirements. And we also developed an online portal for jurisdictions to submit documentation for demonstrating compliance. MTC staff has been providing ongoing support to jurisdictions for assessing compliance, as well as helping them to achieve compliance. The support we've been providing has included reviewing local density information or existing housing and parking policies and plans, and developing model ordinances and other technical assistance materials. We also recently completed a call for projects for planning and implementation funds for jurisdictions to do work to achieve TOC compliance. And those recommendations for funding awards were approved by MTC's Planning Committee on February 14th. And lastly, we are in the process of hiring a consulting firm that will support jurisdictions to assess compliance, fill in any gaps, and submit documentation of their local policies. We expect the consultant team is going to start another round of those one-on-one meetings with jurisdictions later this spring. So turning now to kind of MTC's OBAG program. OBAG is MTC's framework for programming our federal highway formula funds. The main purpose of OBAG, the OBAG framework, is to leverage these flexible funds to advance planned area, which we do through investments and incentives that support regional priorities and local needs. MTC first adopted the OBAG program in 2012. We're currently in the middle of the 3rd grant cycle. And in the box on the right, we've shared some of the issues that will be considered as we develop OBAG 4. We listed them here mostly to provide some context for how the program might change compared to previous OBAG cycles. but the discussion today is mostly about how the TOC policy fits into the OBAG 4 framework. And our goal is to share our initial thoughts as early as possible in the OBAG 4 development process, so that jurisdictions and other stakeholders have sufficient time to both provide feedback as well as take steps toward TOC compliance. So this slide illustrates again some of our initial considerations for how TOC policy compliance might factor into OBAG 4. Based on our initial outreach to jurisdictions, we expect a wide range of compliance from just different jurisdictions. The bell curve on the slide is kind of a conceptual view of our anticipated compliance. We don't know yet exactly where jurisdictions are going to fall on this curve, but our expectation is that most jurisdictions will be in the yellow portion, making substantial progress on TOC compliance by 2026. We think there's going to be several jurisdictions, a few who are fully or nearly fully compliant, which is represented by the green section on the right. And then a smaller number of jurisdictions will likely have made little or no progress toward TOC compliance, which is represented by the red section on the left. Our current plan is to assess TOC compliance at the jurisdiction level based on all of the TOC areas within a jurisdiction, and then categorize jurisdictions into one of these three compliance tiers. And using these tiers to inform the funding eligibility is consistent with the feedback that FTC staff has gotten from our policymakers, that jurisdictions should be allowed some flexibility in meeting the TOC policy requirements. And the overall idea is that projects in higher tier jurisdictions would be eligible for more funding. So specifically, the non-compliant jurisdictions in the lowest tier, red, would be eligible only for limited planning funds that would help them get to TOC compliance. Jurisdictions in the middle tier, the yellow, would be eligible for most OBAG 4 funds. And then jurisdictions in the top tier would be eligible for all OBAG 4 funds, including a set aside that would be specifically for TOC compliant jurisdictions. And then lastly, any jurisdictions without TOCs would be eligible for most OBAG 4 funds, but not that TOC specific set aside. So at this point, there's still a lot of details that we need to figure out along the way. These will be informed by the continued outreach with jurisdictions and other partners over this coming year. Some of the things that we are still working on is the criteria and requirements for setting the thresholds for each of these three tiers. There may be additional ways in which flexibility is applied to evaluating jurisdiction compliance. We also need to determine the approach for evaluating compliance with jurisdictions that have multiple TOCs. And then again, just at this point, we wanted to bring this out to folks to start the conversation around further defining and working towards compliance in time for OBAG 4. So this is kind of what our timeline looks like for the OBAG 4 program. As I mentioned, we're going to continue coordination with partner agencies over the next year. We expect to bring a final OBAG 4 policy to the MTC Commission for adoption in early 2026. The final submission deadline for TOC compliance documentation would follow that early in 2026. We expect the county call for projects in 2026 with project selection in early 2027. And we're tentatively scheduled to take this OBAG 4 framework, these initial ideas, to MTC's Programming and Allocation Committee on March 12th. So that's kind of a first opportunity for folks to weigh in on some of these ideas with our policymakers. With that, I am happy to answer questions or take comments.
Thank you. Chris, did you want to present your?
Yeah, I've just
information
a few updates. Gillian mentioned some technical assistance grants that were awarded recently by MTC. So Sonoma County did very well as part of that call. We were recommended for over $4 million in technical assistance funding to help out with TOC compliance. So I can just read off the names of jurisdictions that received awards. Let's see, Healdsburg, Petaluma, Santa Rosa for both the downtown and north station areas, Sonoma County Airport area, and Windsor. were all recommended for awards. So really appreciate MTC providing that support to help with demonstrating and moving towards compliance. Also wanted to give a brief update on where the planners are. So this is a regular discussion topic at the Planning Advisory Committee. We talk about it most months that we meet together. So one thing that they've recommended is having a few online workshops with the planners and you all together talking about, how this is going to impact your projects and where they're at on, making progress towards compliance. So we'll work on putting together an agenda and setting something up probably in March or April. So we talked about doing 2 different check-ins, one early this spring to kind of just go around the room, evaluate where everyone's at and see what still needs to be done. And then checking in later this year, once you've started developing your CIPs and thinking about what projects you may submit for OBAG to figure out what needs to happen then. So just wanted to get that on your radar and just get the pulse of the group if there's interest in you participating in that. It was recommended by the planning folks. Just want to make sure there'd be some interest in this group before we move forward with trying to get something set up. Seeing a few heads nodding. Okay. Yeah, we'll send out a doodle poll or something like that with a set of agenda topics. And yeah, it'll be good to get everyone in the room to talk about kind of where we're at and what still needs to happen. But it's good to hear that there's that, that yellow area on that bell chart, as long as we're making progress towards compliance, you're not completely locked out. So, Chair, that's my report out.
Actually, I have a question for the different programs area before turning over to the group for their questions too. Is there an order of magnitude of funding available for the different colored tiers? You said the yellow, generally everybody's eligible, but there's a set aside in the green. So what are your insights on funding availability amounts?
I have to admit that I don't know the details on that in terms of kind of, I guess what I would say is the vast majority of the funding is going to be in that yellow, but I don't know the numbers on that.
Okay.
But I can try to get some more information if our funding team has that available.
Thank you. And turning to the group, what questions do we have as TAC?
Will OBAG be running through the funding program? Okay.
That's correct. We'll be including the OBAG 4 as part of our call for products for the SCTA funding program cycle 2 this summer. So we'll be getting those applications in, and then as MTC solidifies their OBAG 4 process next year, we'll be developing which projects that we think are going to be suitable to apply for OBAG 4, similar to this previous cycle where we did our call for products early on, did some scoring, figured out which were the best projects to apply for OBAG 4.
Anything else from group?
Is the same application criteria as previous OBAG?
We're assuming the OBAG 4 criteria probably won't change too much from OBAG 3. So we're going to keep the same similar scoring criteria for the state funding program. And we'll be bringing those criteria back to you next month for your input for the next cycle. So we'll have a chance to tweak them a little bit, but it's probably going to stay pretty similar to the previous cycle.
Also, federal eligibility is required. I have a couple of questions if there's no questions from the rest of the group. On slide 4, you talked about demonstrating priorities. The jurisdictions would need to demonstrate that they were prioritizing ATP and complete streets. What will you be looking for in order to demonstrate that? What kind of documentation will you be looking for that?
I think what we're looking for there is just an indication that you have put that into your CIP, that you've kind of identified the projects and have a plan to try to fill some of those gaps.
And then just out of curiosity, how many jurisdictions do not have TOCs?
Throughout the region?
Yeah, throughout the region.
Okay.
Are there any?
Yeah, so there's 109 jurisdictions in the Bay Area. So there's about 45 or what is that, 47 that don't currently have any TOCs.
Where is that? And those jurisdictions are eligible for all funding,
Correct.
as opposed to if you have TOCs, then you must be compliant.
Correct.
Got it.
And Chris and Jillian, maybe you can clarify for me, but I believe for OBAG 4, Healdsburg will fall under the TOC policy, but Cloverdale will not, correct?
That's my understanding. Gillian, is Cloverdale in or out for OBAG 4? I believe Healdsburg is.
My understanding, I will have to confirm, my understanding is that Cloverdale may be in now based on how it landed in the final blueprint for Plan Bay Area 2050 plus. But I can confirm.
So for those of you not on the SMART corridor, sort of Sebastopol and Sonoma and unincorporated county, this policy wouldn't apply to you.
Thanks for that bombshell.
I've got a question. So we're crafting, an agency would craft a project to be eligible for OBAG 4, and there's a TOC overlay of criteria, right, that we'd be addressing. Those 4 core principles are like land use density, affordable housing. That doesn't translate to the width of the street or bike lanes or anything like that. So how much would that be factored in to a project to look beyond the project to actually the jurisdiction's policies? Like if they adopted a specific plan, for example, that allowed the TOC components in that half-mile radius. Would that be factored in even though it's not directly related to the project being proposed?
Yeah, so that's the idea, is that we are looking for jurisdictions to take those kind of land use related actions or housing related actions within the half-mile area around the TOC area. So it's not specific to the projects that you're going to be requesting funding for OBAG, if I'm understanding your question correctly.
Okay, no, it did address it. It's a holistic view of the city's approach
Yep.
to meeting TOC.
Correct.
All aspects of it. All right, thank you.
Yeah, that's a good distinction because it's a big deal because there are a lot of things that need to be reopened, like general plan elements and stuff to change the zoning and some of the land use code or, the policies in there.
What's going on? You're not making eye contact.
Oh. I just
I just want to know what the hell you guys.
Hey, Steve.
You're on microphone. What other questions are there from the group today? Thank you for the good discussion about this.
I just wanted to clarify one quick thing. So if we're not in a TOC oriented area, then we're not eligible for OBAG. Is that it?
You are eligible for OBAG, you just need to comply with these policies. There's just a set aside of funds for jurisdictions that are in like the highest tier of compliance with the TOC policy. So I think the majority of funds you would be eligible for those funds.
Well, thank you for that clarifying question. All right, is there, Drew, anybody online raising their hand? Right. Well, thank you all. We'll complete this item and we'll move on to the CTP. Chris, I think that's you.
Thank you, Jillian.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. All right, let me go ahead and get these slides queued up. So I'd like to just start out and thank everyone for, getting all those project submissions in for the comprehensive transportation plan. So I've been able to get all of those into the draft CTP project list, and we'll be providing an update on that today. So there are quite a few different reasons we track projects in the comprehensive transportation plan. One is to just have an overarching long-term document looking at transportation needs and priorities going out into the future. The CTP is financially unconstrained, so it's a place to include those ideas that may not be in your capital improvement plans or other things like that. So as part of that, one thing we do in the comprehensive transportation plan is look at future conditions, look at forecasted housing and employment growth, and these transportation improvements, and see how that may impact mobility in the future. So looking at travel times, congestion, emissions, things like that. So, and so it's important for us to have an idea of what the transportation system may look like in the future. And for the CTP, we're looking out to 2050 right now to be able to do those evaluations. Another requirement is for projects to trickle up to the regional transportation plan and be eligible for regional funding. These projects need to start in the CTP and then move their way up into the RTP. Also, as part of our own funding activities, SCTA is required to have an updated policy and planning document to help guide that process. And then we use the CTP as kind of a starting point for projects moving into projects identified as part of our own funding programs. All right, so moving on to the draft project list for 2025. 15 projects have been completed since the last CDP, and I would mention that the CTP projects that are listed out are larger projects of over $1 million or more generally. So there are a lot of other smaller projects that have been completed since the last CDP. These are just those big ones that are listed out specifically in the plan. Over 200 projects were carried over from the last CDP. Thank you for helping us update the cost information and project descriptions for those. So those have all been updated. And then you've submitted over 100 new projects in the plan. So a lot of new ideas and new priorities that we've been able to highlight in the list. So that brings us up to 315 total projects. The estimated project cost is $17 billion. So this is looking out to 2050. So a pretty long planning horizon, and about $5 billion of that is currently identified. So you'll see on the 5 largest projects here that close to $5 billion of that is Highway 37, both the interim and the long-term sea level rise adaptation project. So that's a significant chunk of that. Ongoing operations for SMART, it's also about $2.5 billion. Pavement maintenance for the unincorporated counties, just over $1 billion. And I believe I misspoke on SMART. That's $2.5 billion, not million, for that 25 years. So we have a lot of lane miles in the unincorporated areas. So big cost to maintain all of that pavement. East-west rail capital enhancements is another big ticket one, and that's providing rail service from Novato to Suisun City in Solano County. So here's a look at the table. This is in the staff report, but it's available up here. You can see kind of the breakdown of the different project types, the number of projects, and also the costs. I've broken those up by the existing projects and the new projects. So you can see we have a lot of bicycle pedestrian projects, about 1.3 billion total cost for those. Moving to highway projects, that's about 5 billion. Intersection and ITS, that's about 400 million, close to 400 million. The multimodal streetscape improvement category is, about $500 million, 469 million. So that includes bicycle and pedestrian improvements and ped improvements as well. So it's pavement maintenance and improvements along the entire streetscape or street corridor. Maintenance, you can see there, about 3 billion. Transit capital projects, about 3 billion. And then transit improvements to operations and ongoing operations is about 4 billion. So you can see the breakdown of all of those there. And this table is also available in the staff report if you want to refer back to it. So I've included a really small typeface version of the total list in the agenda packet. So you can zoom in and out of that to check on the projects for your jurisdiction. After this meeting, I can also send out a spreadsheet version so you can filter and zoom in and out and be able to review that a little bit easier than using that really small text PDF. But we'd like you to take a chance to review the projects for your jurisdiction. And then, keep in mind that generally we include projects of a project cost of over $1 million. So there are exceptions to that. So if there are projects that you'd like to really highlight for your decision makers or the public that are smaller, we can definitely include those separately in the CTP just for visibility. So definitely an option. So here's the key information to check on: title, project description. The cost is a big one to check on. Make sure that's still current and year of implementation. And we're looking for updates by April 30th of this year. I'd also mention that the draft list is going to our SCTA Board of Directors on March 10th. So it'd probably be a good idea to be familiar with your projects ahead of time and maybe brief them on this item. So here's a look at the CTP project list schedule. We worked with you all to update the existing project information last fall. The call for new CTP projects closed in December. The draft updated CTP project list is out and available for review now. So it's been through all of our committees and going to the Board of Directors next month. Once we wrap up that draft and make sure it's all updated and nailed down, we'll move into doing that performance assessment. So looking at future conditions and looking at all of the proposed projects and see how that impacts future travel and mobility. This summer, David and Shauna and the programming and projects team, sorry, will be working with you on the program, our SCTA funding program cycle 2 call for projects. Based on the results of that, we'll be developing a short-term implementation plan for the CTP. So the draft project list is looking at that 25 years out. So we'd like to look at the near-term priorities as well. So what we should focus on for the next 5 to 10 years, focusing on those priorities in the SCTA funding program cycle 2. And then we'll be taking all of that information and updating the content in the CTP and looking to release a final CTP by the end of this year. So thank you again for all of your help in updating the list, and look forward to any comments or reviews you have on that. And I'll work with Drew to get a Excel version of that out this week. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Ms. Chair.
Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for summarizing all the information too. There's a wealth of new information here, and thank you everybody for contributing to this.
Yep.
And Chris, for you and your team for compiling. This is a big lift.
Yep.
And thank you for gearing us up to work with you all for the upcoming call for projects. What questions do folks have for this process?
How often is this done again? 5 years?
Yeah, for every 4 or 5 years. Yeah, it's a rolling cycle. So there'll be chances to come back and do it again soon. Yep.
Mapped. It was mapped before, right? And it wasn't mapped, and is it mapped now, just so that we can see, especially where in between jurisdictions, if I didn't include something and I wanted the county to include it, or vice versa.
We haven't mapped it yet. It's 300 projects, so and a lot of them, when we look at the countywide scale, it's really hard because some are like, 100 feet and some are like 2 miles worth of roadway. So we've tried doing point locations in the past. Maybe something we can do, I can talk to David and Shauna, maybe for the funding program cycle 2, it'll be a smaller subset. So maybe we could work on trying to map those out. 40 or 50 is a lot easier to map out than 300. So, but yeah.
So you're asking here for any revisions to the draft lists by April 30th. Is that new projects or just what you have on the list currently?
So if you do have a project that was completely missed, that's a priority, we'd prefer you submitted that as part of the call for projects, but if there's a big gap or hole for something that should be in there, especially if it's a near-term priority, let me know and we can work with you on that. But like Craig said, we'll be redoing this in 4 or 5 years. So if it's a longer term thing, we could catch it next time around. But yeah, if there's something missing that your board member, may be really interested in, let us know. We'll make sure we include that.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Any other questions? All right. Anything online, Drew?
Hands up online. I guess I have a question. I hope I'm not embarrassing myself because I really don't understand a lot of the crossover here. So when something is on the comprehensive transportation plan, how does that relate to the separate document that's the ATP with its own list? Or are they the same list?
So the ATP list is definitely incorporated into the CTP.
Okay.
But a lot of the projects in the ATP are in that smaller dollar amount level.
Gotcha.
So you're in an interesting situation since a lot of your ATP projects are bigger dollar amounts. So we like to list those out separately in both the CTP and the ATP, if possible.
When you use the column that said existing projects, the dollar amount that's affiliated with the existing projects, is that the dollar amount that's currently been funded, or is that the total projected dollar amount of the total project cost?
Total project cost, not
Okay.
funded. Yeah.
Those
So there's
are
a
my two questions.
There's a separate column for identified funding, which I believe is in the print list. If not, I can include that in the Excel version that goes out. That's something that we collected as well.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Stephen. Good clarification. And if there's nothing else, we'll close this item. Thank you, Chris. The item 5, TFCA TDA 3 quarterly report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This item is provided for information on the status of TDA 3 and TFCA projects. And if there's any corrections, please let us know.
Any questions right now? We have the cycle coming up for TDA 3. All right, thank you. Item 6, measures M and Go Sonoma.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. So before you are, so this one is a standing item. This is the obligation status of both the Measure M projects that remain and the Go Sonoma projects that have been appropriated, that have had funding appropriated so far. So provides you with the information of if you're programmed in a given year, if you were programmed in a previous year and perhaps didn't obligate your funding, you're shown here, and that's what the red number is. If you have an open appropriation and it has been more than 6 months since your last invoice, that shows highlighted in red. If you are approaching 6 months, it shows highlighted in yellow. This is an informational item for you to be able to track your own projects via the appropriations that are open and any programming that you might have in those two categories.
Anybody have any questions for Shawna?
Yeah, I have just a clarification on this table where it says amended measure M allocation for LSR.
Oh, we're not at that item yet.
Oh, okay. I'm
We're
sorry.
getting there.
You're getting there. Okay, never mind.
Thank you for setting the stage for that. So anything else on the last item, Shawna?
Oh, man.
Okay. So item 6.2, measure M, maintenance of effort. Wording.
So maintenance of effort is a requirement of both Measure M and Go Sonoma in order to demonstrate that you are not supplanting funds for your maintenance funds. You have to demonstrate that you are using essentially the same amount you take a few dollars here or there, that you were prior to the passage of the measure. And then we index that information. So that reporting is due on February 15th of each year. I started warning you about this in December, particularly since you provide the same information to the state for your SB1 funding that you receive for maintenance. So we've heard from all but 2 of the jurisdictions, and that reporting is now overdue. I report this out to the board. I will be reporting it to the board in April, but I would like to have reporting complete before we get to that point. So if you guys could get your reporting in, that'd be great.
Any questions from the group for Shauna on the reporting? All right, well, thank you, Shauna.
Okay. And then the next item are the allocation estimates and funding ratios. So for Measure M, the apportionment programs have we provide an estimate of what we expect you will be receiving in the apportionment programs every year. We provide that information to you no later than February 1st of each year so that you can all make your plans and your budgets and so forth. Last year, we provided you the estimate for Measure M, and I kind of forgot that Measure M will stop collecting in March of this year, and Go Sonoma will begin collecting in April. So I revised the estimate that was provided for Measure M. But now, of course, how the money rolls in will be different. This is essentially just for planning purposes, but it was to give you an idea. Because of course, the amount that you will receive for your local streets and roads rehab from Measure M is a different amount. It's a different ratio than what you will be getting for Go Sonoma. So I reduced the amount for the LSR and LSR funding, and then I included an estimate for the April through June 30th of the GSR funding, and I have also provided you with an estimate for the Go Sonoma roads funding for 25-26, which will begin on July 1st and go all the way through June 30th of next year. With that, I will be happy to answer any questions you might have, because I have received a number of questions and comments. People want to know how they combine and what does this mean, and do I count all of this information together, or what? So if you have questions, please let me know.
Sean, I just have one question. The use of the funds or the restrictions on the use of the funds between Measure M, and Go Sonoma, is there a difference? Okay, so it's the similar guidance for usage.
Yeah, all the policies are in the strategic implementation plan.
And then would that also be the same with the Prop 1B funds?
Correct. Just to remind everyone, there is a column on the revised fiscal year 24-25 website for the Prop 1B state local partnership program swap that was done way back in 2010. As we brought it to the committee last year, the board finally adopted a resolution documenting that one-time payment. So for the jurisdictions that did not receive local streets projects funds from Measure M, namely everyone other than Santa Rosa, Petaluma, and the county, you're getting a one-time payment probably in Q4 this fiscal year to bump up your LSR payment. So look forward to that, and we'll let you know on the timing of that payment.
Shauna, thank you for providing all the tables for everybody. What questions does this group have?
I have a question. There's highlighting for center line miles. Is that because you need an update, or it's just because it was updated in 2020?
Those are highlighted if I got an update. So
Got it.
when you report your annual reporting, which is different, right? That's the reporting we get in September. That's not the maintenance of effort reporting. That's just, you tell us how you actually spent the funds. You also, there's a question on that form that says, have your lane miles changed? And this is what it affects. This is your total lane miles, and it adjusts what your ratio is. So if your lane miles have changed and you report that, then it will be highlighted. So when you guys submitted, when reporting was submitted September of last year. If it was changed, it's highlighted.
Other questions? Clarifications? All right, thank you. Thank you, Shauna.
But
So on to item 7, regional information update.
so this is also a standing item, Madam Vice Chair. This is the federal inactive obligation status. I provide it to you every month. I ask for you to update it if there are things on the list that are lingering. This month, only the county has projects on this list. Everyone else has been able to remove themselves from the list, so well done. That's great news. There are some projects that have been on the list for the county for well over a year. Been on for years. As a matter of fact, there's one Safe Routes to School pilot project that was done in Sebastopol that I think has been on the books for like 10 years. I'm stunned that it hasn't been deobligated already, but it still languishes on this list. I believe all the funding is spent. It's just a matter of the final report needing to be filed. And I think because it was a cooperative arrangement between Department of Health Services and Sonoma County PI, the Department of Health Services has not yet finished that final report, but it does need to get done.
And I believe there's also 2 other projects that are led by Permit Sonoma that also need assistance being closed out. If public infrastructure can talk to Permit Sonoma about it.
Okay.
Shauna and David, who's the lead? Who's the main contact in SGI to get that done? Is that a Nader?
Nader has been managing this and he does usually provide updates. I haven't seen one this month, but he usually provides me with a list of, here's all the projects on the list, here's the status.
In particular, the Safe Routes to School in Sebastopol, though, is that something that we should approach Nader when we see him?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and he's aware of it. It's just a matter of getting DHS to do their part, I think.
Sure, okay.
I've been in the middle of it in the past and we've been trying to get Caltrans to figure out, okay, what do we, because
Right.
it's been submitted. It's just what not acknowledged, I believe, so, but we'll keep poking and figuring it out, so.
Don't hesitate to call me if you need assistance with local assistance.
Okay.
Because I can help navigate that process. If there's something that needs to be done.
Sounds good, thank you.
Yes, thank you. We find that with many of the projects, it takes a lot of collaboration amongst all of us in this group to keep things moving forward. Any questions from folks on this reporting? Thank you for the input and for the presentation. So that puts us into the SCTA RCPA meetings.
Yeah, so we will be having the next board meeting on March 10th. I don't have the agenda set up yet, so I'll just read the items that we presented to the Board of Directors on the 10th, including standard meeting notes and a Form 700 notification, Title VI implementation plan, subscription to HireGov. David or Shauna might help me with, oh wait, never mind. BB Build Bikeways and Pathways programming for Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition. Did I say that correctly? Bike to Anywhere month agreement, TFCA policy change and call for projects, TDA Article 3 call for projects. Regular calendar includes the climate funding strategy ad hoc report, elective pay briefing, the SCTA RCPA briefing book, legislative update, transit ad hoc report out, committee selection, ad hoc committee appointments, the CTP draft project list, and asking the board to accept the SR 12 Fulton Road feasibility study.
Thank you
Thank
for
you,
providing.
David.
Did you have additions to that or?
I was just sharing it on the screen.
That's the list I was reading from.
Got it. Thank you. Appreciate it. And so that moves us on to item 9, roundtable discussion, grants, bid environment, other business and announcements.
Santa Rosa has 2. Our public review draft of our ATP should be live on Monday. and it'll be up for public comment for all of March. It is very ambitious. Our new director has pretty much overhauled the way that we're approaching our CIP projects, and our ATP is now driving pretty much all of our projects in conjunction with pavement maintenance. So it's a really interesting document to look at if you're interested, and all of you are at some point in Santa Rosa. So if you want to take a look and comment, that'd be great. And then we also are planning to host our second annual bike-in block party. So if you're interested in attending, it's going to be on Saturday, May 10th from 2 to 7 p.m. We're going to shut down a portion of 4th Street, and we'll use the courthouse square as well. Last year was our first year. We did it on Bike to Anywhere Day, but because we also did the Energizer station, it's too long of a day. So now we're doing them separate, and this one's going to be before Bike to Anywhere Day. So we'll have bike clinics from the Bike Coalition. The Safe Routes to School crew is going to do bike relays for kids and families and education. We'll have bands, and it'll be a great time. So you should come. We're going to try to make it a more regional event. So it's just bigger than Santa Rosa.
Nice.
That's all I've got.
Very nice. Who else?
We were excited to see a recommendation for HSIP funding for both of our applications. So that we applied for signal improvements at 35 signalized intersections to update our hardware and install accessible push buttons. So that was successful. And then we also had a request for 2 enhanced pedestrian crossings and 1 new pedestrian crossing on Snow Mountain Parkway. So the intersection, we have 2 existing uncontrolled crosswalks that will receive upgrades in the form of median refuge islands and improved flashing beacons. And then we have 1 new crossing going in for the Lynch Creek Trail across Snow Mountain Parkway that will have the same treatments. And yeah, so that was exciting to see. And I saw that Sebastopol was also successful.
Thank you.
I could just give a brief update from Healdsburg. We're more in the implementation phase of some of the grants that we've received. We received an OBAG 3 grant for Grove Street. And so we're working through the implementation phase of that. We got the section 106 process was so cute. Shauna had advised us to start it early, and it was going to be cumbersome. It was definitely, and we think we're on our way out of that. So Grove Street, we're doing kind of complete street improvements for, a half mile, 3/4 of a mile with our OBAG 3 funds. We did receive some ATP funds for kind of a larger complete streets project on Healdsburg Avenue, like a road diet, a lane reduction, and converting those to bike lanes. So we're working through that project also. And then we have a small HSIP project for a rectangular rapid flasher bulb out kind of a crossing. And then just the bid environment, just to add to that, I guess we've seen consultant design contract costs, be quite high relative to the, physical improvement cost, I guess. So that was what I have. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Just a quick announcement from SCTA RCPA. We've regarding the Sonoma County travel model. We've received your feedback for the network updates, trying to update the travel model to a baseline year of 2023. We've also completed the existing conditions for land use as well too. So showing what types of development have been happening over the past 3 or 4 years. This data will go into feeding the travel model, which we run for a variety of different projects, plans, larger things where we want to be able to evaluate VMT impacts. We'll be sending out an update with just a summary of the new findings for land use very shortly. We're just trying to wrap up a few last details so you can confirm kind of with maps and tables that our calculations updates given your feedback are accurate. Next steps will be updating the transit database to reflect 2023 values, and then start moving into the projections for Plan Bay Area 2050 plus, and then also the general plan projections as well too for your individual jurisdictions. And that's my update.
Thank you, Adam. Other folks have updates for the group?
I have a
Sure.
couple of items that I did want to chat about. The first being, you may have noticed that Drew mentioned our Title VI plan. I don't know how everybody is, what stage you are all in. If you have federal funds, you must comply with Title VI by providing an implementation plan or a plan to develop an implementation plan. You also have a requirement to respond to Caltrans's inquiry about the Title VI implementation plan no later than March 31st of this year. So please make sure you get that form in. You should have all received that notification directly from Caltrans, but if you have any questions, please feel free to talk to us. Margot Kanyas of our staff has been working diligently to get our implementation plan done, and that requires a number of other documents that have to be subsumed as appendices into the implementation plan, like limited English proficiency plan, how you will consult with folks who don't necessarily speak English. You have to do a demography report. There are a number of other things that have to be included. So I just want to make sure that everybody is aware of it and working on it. If you are not, please feel free to contact me and we can chat about it. Up to this point, SCTA didn't have one because up to this point, we don't own anything. We don't operate any transit services. So we didn't feel it applied to us. We have been told specifically by FHWA that it does apply to us and we do have to have a plan. So if your jurisdiction already has transit, then you probably already have a plan. But you should make sure that it is up to date and that you are maintaining it. It is a living document. So make sure that you are looking at it and that you can comply with Caltrans's requirements and FHWA's requirements. It is a requirement of receiving federal funds too. So expect that to impact your ability to receive federal funds if you are not in compliance.
Hey, Shauna, could the SCTA plan be provided as a model plan for other agencies?
It's on the agenda for the board to consider this coming March 10th. We'll be happy to provide it once it's approved, sure.
And Caltrans has a template. It's a very kind of bare bones document. I think our plan's like 20 pages long. So there's some models out there.
But there's certain key components it needs to have in there. I filled out the query on the website, and it's like 16 pages worth of check, asking for this, and it provides you very little room for wiggling out of it. It wants you to provide a date or how you're complying with it now. So that would be helpful to see yours.
Absolutely. The other
Hey,
thing,
Shauna, if I may,
Sure.
did everybody receive the request from Caltrans then for section or Title VI?
We should forward the email.
Sure. So if you are on Caltrans's newsletter listserv or whatever it is, when you get their, like, I think their weekly newsletter updates that provide you with information from local assistance. I have recommended that everybody be on that list many times at this meeting, but if you are not on it, let me know. I can make sure that you can get on it, but I have been receiving updates on that every week. So if you haven't heard about it, if you don't know what it is, please let me know. I will make sure that you get that information. Everybody here comfortable? No? Mark? Okay.
Yeah, I'm the new kid, so.
Yeah.
Caltrans hasn't bugged me yet.
Okay. I think everybody else is current. Okay. And then,
Thank you for that, Shauna.
sure. The other thing I wanted to bring up, just out of curiosity, Has anyone, so there's an issue with Caltrans doesn't want to maintain green paint for bike lanes. Everybody is probably aware of this. Has anybody done any tests or pilot programs with like tinted pavement or anything? Anybody looking into any of that? Is that kind of maintenance thing, or is that fades too? So I'm just wondering if anybody's got any alternatives.
I know we're in the same mode as Caltrans, but.
Does Caltrans provide any options? They just said they don't like green paint.
They will enter into a maintenance agreement where you guys maintain it,
Mm.
but they will not, their maintenance crews will not maintain the paint.
We use, or our striping contractor who we use a lot uses MMA for green paint, and it seems to hold up really well.
I don't know what MMA is.
What is it? Methyl methacrylate. It's super durable and holds up better than thermo. Thermo kind of breaks off in chunks over time, especially if they're using those preformed blocks. This stuff works pretty well. So it does, I think, require some sort of special certification for the stripers to actually apply it. And I don't know how much Caltrans works with it, but that's what we use for anything that's colorized where we don't think thermo will hold up well.
Thank you for sharing that.
And then the last item I have is just a reminder, you will hear from me tomorrow, but quarterly reporting for all of your Go Sonoma projects is coming due starting on March 1st. I would like to have it done by March 15th by you so that I can get it done and posted to the website by the end of the month. It is important for us, particularly in planning for our budget cycle, to know your realistic schedules. So there are about 3 different places on your quarterly reporting that require updates. So make sure that you're checking those different spots. There's the project status. That's just where you type words. Then there's the schedule itself. That's a table. So make sure that gets updated as well. And then there's the funding plan. And if anything has changed in the funding plan or with your schedule, when you are expecting to access those funds, then make sure that you're putting that into the quarterly reporting so that we can help plan and make sure that we are working with you in order to get those projects moved forward. Because it affects when we get the cooperative agreements completed, when we were expecting an appropriation request from you guys, if you have funding in those programs. So just a heads up that that's coming, and to make sure that you look for that. If you have trouble with making edits on the site, and I will be sending out the link that is hosted by VSCE. We're still struggling with SharePoint, so because the county IT department wants to have all of the links that we send out expire within no more than 60 days, which doesn't allow us to do another quarterly cycle. We would have to generate new links. So we're working on that. But in the meantime, it will be the same thing that you have done in the past. I will send out the link to your specific project info sheets. If you are unable to make the changes on the SharePoint site, you can download that form, make your changes, save it as a different file, and upload it again. That's the workaround to get to edits directly on that page if you can't make that work. That's it.
The county still loves SharePoint too. Thank you for the links. Is there a question?
I just had one, I think, and there was the Go Sonoma funding, but then there was the other funding, and I don't know the appropriate name. Where it was, I think it was the funding swap with the highway money and go.
Yeah, so we'll be reaching out about that. So there was 9 million in Measure M funds that were swapped with STIP funds for some landscaping on 101. So those funds were programmed to a number of projects in the county, including some in Healdsburg, some for the unincorporated county. So we'll be following up on that so that we can determine schedules and see when people need their funds, so we can get the funds in our budget for next fiscal year if they're needed, and do cooperative agreements with the cities and the county for those projects.
Is there a generic term that you're using to identify those funds or?
It's like Measure M 101 STIP exchange. It's kind of unwieldy. We need a better name for it.
You need a fancy
Just call it
acronym.
The funding swap for right now.
Actually, I think we might have some of that too, and
Correct.
I am wondering about it because our finance wants to know. What is it? Because if it's federal, then that's a whole thing. 'Cause
It's
if
Measure
it
M
was to
funds.
avoid federal, right?
It has to be eligible for federal applications,
Right.
but it is Measure M funding.
It's Measure M funds.
Good. Agree, because the accounting gets more detailed when it's federal.
Oh,
Yeah, it doesn't have to be treated as federal funds. It's Measure M funds.
Anybody else? Updates?
Through the chair, I wanted to ask, Sean or David about upcoming deadlines on updating our priority 5 projects or priority list. What is that timeline? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, we'll be coming back to you in April, I believe, to talk about the revised scoring criteria for the SCTA funding program cycle 2. And then we'll have the call for projects, I believe, will launch in June with applications due mid-August. I think last time around, most of the jurisdictions took their priorities to their governing bodies ahead of time. We definitely recommend doing that to get early council and board of supervisors inputs on what those priorities are going to be. And just as a reminder, it'll be the top 5 projects for all the jurisdictions other than the county, and Santa Rosa will get top 10 since they're larger. And each of the transfer operators will also get their top 5 as well. So we did have a schedule that went to the TAC, I believe, back in September, and we can send that out again.
Call for projects in June, due in August.
Yeah, thank you for asking that, because it always is a lot of work for all of us to bring those projects together.
And it is worth mentioning that public engagement is a big part of this. So this is your ability, this is your start of your public engagement to get feedback on what these projects are, and make sure you're documenting all of that so that you can include that in your application.
And just as a reminder, I know we talked about it earlier, but for all of those projects, they need to be in the updated comprehensive transportation plan project list that Chris talked about earlier. So if they're not in there and you know you're going to submit something, be sure that you talk to Chris and see if you can get it in there late.
And there are bucket projects that, like Chris said, if it's not $1 million or more, it's probably not going to be individually listed, but it probably fits into one of those categories. So just find that category.
Curious if you have anything to report on any federal impacts or funding impacts from the new administration.
At this point, for our existing fiscal year 23 Safe Streets for All grant that we are doing a number of planning activities for, we have an executed grant agreement and they've paid our latest invoice on that. Our fiscal year 24 grant agreement, which had a number of demonstration projects in Petaluma, Roanoke Park, Cotati, Santa Rosa, and Windsor. That grant agreement unfortunately did not get executed before January 20th and has stalled with FHWA headquarters. From what we have heard, any grant agreements that are already executed are being treated as normal. Any kind of formulaic funds are being processed by FHWA, but when it comes to any kind of discretionary grants, those are all, for the most part, frozen. And any kind of discretionary actions the feds need to take are all going through DC right now. So everything is slow and we're not getting a lot of updates right now.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for that update. Question we're all thinking about right now. So thank you. And you'll keep us posted when you do get updates. Thank you. Anybody else? Any other questions or information to share? Anybody online? Okay. And so with that, unless there's any objections, so we'll close the meeting.